At my daughter's wedding, she laughed to the crowd. "He's just a lonely old man, don't mind him." Everyone smiled, but my hands shook as I held her gift. My heart broke while the music drowned me out. Then I took the microphone and revealed something that made her face burn. Her dress turned red. If you're watching this on your phone on a bus, or lying on your bed, or sitting on your couch with a cup of tea, tell me where you are right now. Say it out loud or type it in a comment. I want you standing beside me in that hall, under the chandelier that drank the light and spit it back in pieces, under the speakers that pushed the music into our ribs, next to the table where the cake waited like polite snow. I want you here in the second my daughter lifted the microphone, turned and said with a laugh that pretended to be soft, "He's just a lonely old man, don't mind him." People did what people do when they think a joke is safe. They laughed because it is easier to be part of a wave than to stand against it. Their laughter rolled over me like warm water that still makes you cold. I did not move. I kept my hands around the small velvet box I had carried all evening. The clasp pressed into my palm like a square tooth. My hands shook, and the music covered the sound the way a storm covers a whisper. The first thing I felt was not rage. It was a drop in the floor. It was the old wooden feeling you get when a board gives and you think you might fall through. And then, like a hand catching my sleeve, the past pulled me back to the kitchen where my wife laughed at me for burning toast, to the tiny shirt we buttoned wrong on a sleepy baby, to the line of light that used to fall across the pantry door every morning. My wife chose a red dress for our daughter's first birthday, not pink. She held it up to the window and said, "Red is for joy. Red is for courage." She put that dress on our baby and kissed her toes as if they were rare coins. I baked a crooked cake after a night shift, and we ate it with spoons. Later, my wife folded the red dress into a box with tissue and wrote in her neat hand on the lid, "For later, when the world makes you careful, and you need to remember, you were brave." That box lived on the top shelf of our closet, and sometimes when the house was quiet, I would reach up and touch the cardboard, just to feel the shape of the promise. I worked years that had more night than day. I wore out boots, and then the boots after them. I fixed the roof after a storm, and the kitchen after a fire, and learned the names of the men at the bank by the sound of their shoes in the hallway. When my wife got sick, I learned the language of machines and the patience of chairs. I held our daughter's hand in waiting rooms, and spoke with my face when my voice would have failed. After the funeral, I slept on my side of the bed while she slept on mine because the pillow smelled more like her mother, and I did not say a word about the ache. I sold my old boat, the one I loved more than any tool, and the motorcycle my brother and I rebuilt, and the last shares of the company whose concrete floors remembered my footsteps, so the tuition bills would not look at our daughter with teeth. I called it love, not sacrifice. I learned to braid hair badly and to cook decently, and to sit through school plays without checking my watch. But time has a way of sanding away the edges of a picture until you notice your face has faded more than the others. As she grew, the calls shortened. The visits needed scheduling. The jokes shifted. "Dad, you worry too much," she said at 20, laughing like a friend instead of a daughter. "Dad, you're stuck in the past," she said at 22, standing in the doorway of the house that had kept us in winter like a fire keeps a camp of travelers. "You should sell this place, it's dated," she said, dated like mold. Another time I brought fruit and a bottle of wine to the new apartment she shared with the man who would become her husband. She opened the door and her face did something polite. "Oh, Dad," she said, in the tone you use for a delivery that arrived early. "We're just heading out." He came to the door behind her, smooth and neat, with a handshake that felt like a receipt. "Sir, you must be proud," he said, eyes on his phone. His parents were kind in the way of people who have practiced kindness in mirrors. "You've done so much," his mother said, as if she were judging a cake at a fair. "It must be a relief to let the younger generation take over." I said it was. I said it tasted like freedom. It tasted like old coins you find under a couch. You might think each of these moments is small, and you would be right. Small things make nets. You do not notice the net at first. You bend and stand and spin and the spaces are wide. Then one day you move and find yourself held. I found the net the afternoon she sent a photo of brunch with his family on Father's Day, and then texted me, "We'll celebrate next week, promise." I found it when she forgot the day we sit at the lake for her mother and sent peonies 2 days later with a card that said, "Busy week. Love you." I found it when she said after I fixed a leak, "You don't need to be needed anymore," and laughed like it was a good thing. I said nothing. I stored the words the way a man stores tools on a pegboard, where he can see them and choose the right one later. Not to hurt, to repair, or to decide not to repair. It was my wife's voice that taught me what to do. In the hospital, when the light came in thin and the machine lines moved like small rivers, she squeezed my hand with fingers that still had all their strength and said, "Protect her, and protect yourself. Do both. Make choices now that will hold later when your hands shake." We met with a lawyer who talked about trusts and titles and paper that can be safe even when people are not. I did not like the words. They felt like cold rooms. But my wife looked at me the way she did when she was trying to teach me how to prune a rosebush, cut away the dead so the living can breathe. And I listened. The house stayed mine, placed in a trust with a key that did not jingle. The plan was simple and private. When our daughter was ready, when her life was steady and her respect steady with it, I would give her not just a building but a story. Not just walls, but the rooms inside the rooms. All the way back to where her mother laughed and spilled sugar on the counter. I bought a velvet case when winter was deep. I chose one that opened with a sound you could hear even under music. I put the deed in the trust paper and the old bills stamped paid inside. I wrote a card that said, "The house that learned your name is yours when you carry ours." I tore the card up. I wrote another. I wanted the words to be plain as bread. On the day of the wedding, the house dressed itself as if it knew. Lanterns made necklaces overhead. The hedges stood straight as ushers. The lake lay still, a bright coin in a dark dish. Caterers moved like quiet birds. The band tuned and the chords sounded like questions asked by polite people. The photographer walked backwards and caught smiles before they were ready. I wore a suit that fit and a tie my wife once called the captain, and I carried the velvet case like a small animal I did not want to startle. When my daughter stepped out in her dress, the room folded its hands. Lace at the shoulders, a veil like a soft fence around her face, a bouquet that smelled of gardens I could not name. She hugged me quick. The hug ended before I could remember how to keep it. She moved on. I stood and looked at the pantry door leaning behind a curtain, the pencil marks stacked like a ladder to the ceiling. I touched the top line as I passed and felt the groove the pencil had made when I pressed hard because I did not want to believe she had grown so fast. The ceremony glowed. Vows were spoken with careful mouths. Rings were slid with careful hands. Applause was poured like warm water. His father spoke about ambition as if it were a family dog that always comes when called. His mother spoke about legacy like a coat you can put on any child and it will fit. Her friend from college told a long story about ramen at 2 a.m, and everyone laughed because the story hid the parts about loneliness that ramen always hides. When it was time for the father-daughter dance, the DJ picked a song that was both old and new and therefore belonged to no one. She put her hand on my shoulder like someone setting down a glass on a table they do not own. "You okay?" she asked without looking at me. "Yes," I said, because the truth would not have helped her. "You look beautiful," I tried again. "It's my day," she said. And then her mouth found the crowd and smiled at them the way people smile when they want the light to follow. The song ended. She kissed my cheek like she was stamping a form. She stepped away, already turning her face to the next thing. Then she took the microphone. She thanked the florist and the planner and the venue and the weather, as people do when they want to touch everything that might be responsible for their happiness. She praised her husband and his family in sentences that sounded practiced and clean. Applause rose and fell like a tide that has somewhere to be. And then she looked at me and something playful crossed her face. The old mischief that used to make me laugh in supermarkets when she slipped an extra candy into the cart. She went for the easy shine. "He's just a lonely old man, don't mind him." It was a spark thrown at a pile of dry leaves. The room laughed because laughter is a current and everyone wants to float. I kept my face still because faces can betray the heart, and I had promised myself I would not betray mine again. I counted. 1, 2, 3. I count when the world wants to spin me. The first count pulled me out of the river of noise. The second set my feet square. The third cooled my blood and told me what to do. I did not walk off. I did not shout. I did not wait until later to send a long message she would read with one eye while watching a show. I went to the bandstand. The band leader looked at me with a question in his eyebrows. I nodded. He passed me the microphone with both hands, like a teacup. I looked at my daughter first, so my words would find their right address. "Before we dance," I said, and my voice came out steady, "I want to tell a small story." The room obeyed the old rule that says you are quiet for a story. Not silence, but a soft place where silence could land if it needed to. I lifted the velvet case so she, and only she, would see it. "This is a gift," I said. "I have been holding it for months. It is not shiny. It is not fashionable. It is a promise on paper." I told a short piece of the memory I had carried all night, so she would know I was not performing for the guests. "When you turned 1, your mother put you in a red dress and said red is for joy, red is for courage. She folded that dress away and told me to save it for the day you forgot you were brave." Her mouth softened at the word mother. The shield in her smile lowered a finger's width. I opened the case. The clasp made a clean click that found its way through the music and the breath and the lights. I did not hold the papers up high for the crowd. I held them at chest height, where a person stands when they are telling the truth to one other person. "We are standing in a house that knows our names," I said. "It is mine. It sits in a trust that your mother asked me to build so we would be brave when our hands shook. Tonight I plan to give it to you, not as a prize, as a home." His father put his glass down with the care of a man setting aside a thought he will come back to later. His mother touched the strand at her throat as if pearls were advice. The groom took half a step forward and halted because his shoes did not know where to go. My daughter's eyes went to the papers and back to my face, as if she were watching a bird she wanted to call back to her hand. I closed the case. The room made a small sound, the sound a room makes when it is asked to notice something important that is not loud. "A gift needs air," I said. "It needs respect. It cannot be poured over a laugh like water over a stain and expected to soak in. A father cannot beg for space at his own table." I spoke like I was telling a recipe. Plain. Exact. The edges of her cheeks flushed. The color started at her throat and climbed, slow as a thought you don't want but cannot stop thinking. I saw the fabric at her shoulder shift with her breath. I did not say the words that hurt the most. The ones about loneliness said, as if it were a failure, and not the price a person pays for loving someone who left and still keeping a place for them. I kept my voice like a beam across a gap. "I will not give this tonight," I said. "Not because I am angry, not because I love you less, because gifts teach, and I will not teach you that respect can be added later like garnish." I put the microphone back on its stand. It made a tiny thud like a heart heard through a wall. I tucked the velvet case under my arm, where a book rests when a man is not finished reading it. I turned and walked toward the French doors. The garden lights waited like small moons. The lake made its soft, secret sounds. The air out there smelled like cut grass and a little bit of the heaters we rented to keep the night from stealing the warmth. Behind me, the room rearranged itself without moving. People do that when they are looking for where to put their eyes. Chairs scraped a little. A laugh died before it reached teeth. Somewhere a child giggled because children's joy is loyal only to itself. I put my hand in my pocket and found the key fob the trust lawyer had given me years ago. Attached to the old leather my wife once called, "You and your brown thing." The leather was smooth where my thumb had rubbed it for years without thinking. "Keys mean you can lock and you can open." My wife used to say no rosebush blooms because you want it to. It blooms because you cut what chokes it, and you feed what feeds it. "Don't be gentle with what hurts it," she would say, her fingers firm. "Be gentle with what helps it grow." I stood with the door open and the night breathing on my face, and thought about what hurts and what helps. Then I heard my name, not sung into a microphone, not thrown like a coin to a fountain, but spoken the way you ask for water in the dark. "Dad." It came from behind me and it carried the tiniest wobble, like a plate set down on a table that isn't steady yet. I turned. She stood there with her hands empty and her face a new color of red, the kind that arrives when truth taps the skin from inside. Her husband hovered a step behind, eyes jumping between me and the case and the eyes of the people who could decide whether this was a story or a scene. She took a breath and I watched it move the lace at her collarbone. I did not speak. I did not step toward her. I held still the way you hold still for a wild bird that might land on your hand if you are quiet enough. I waited, because waiting is sometimes the only strong thing a father can do. She stood there with her hands empty and her mouth open on the first sound. It hung in the room like a raindrop, round and clear and not yet fallen. I waited. I did not nod. I did not rescue her. I held the quiet the way a man holds a ladder steady. She took another breath, the kind that lifts the lace on a collarbone, and finally let the word drop. I'm sorry. No microphone, no audience voice. Just the small voice a child uses when she finally tells the truth at a kitchen table. The sound touched me and kept going. It touched the pantry door behind the curtain, and the pencil lines there, and the box on the high closet shelf, where a red dress slept in tissue paper. It touched the part of me that had counted breaths all night. I did not move toward her, I said, gentle and flat at the same time. Say it where you laughed. She flinched a little. She knew what I meant. She looked at the microphone the way a swimmer looks at cold water. Her husband whispered something I could not hear. The word later, maybe. The word that people use when they hope time will erase the shape of their choices. She shook her head once. She walked back to the stand. Her heels made that small, serious sound on the floor that heels make when they are not sure the ground will be kind. She lifted the microphone with both hands, as if it might break if she used one. The room's breath came back to it, gathered under the lights. She did not look at the planner, or the florist, or the guests. She found me. Dad, she said into the air that had just carried her laugh. I am sorry. The words were not polished. They did not arrange themselves into a pretty shape. They were true in the part that matters. I forgot who taught me the shape of home. I forgot who kept the roof honest. I forgot who I am when I'm not trying to be bright in a room, she swallowed. I forgot Mom would hear me. A ripple passed through the guests, the way wind passes through tall grass. The bandleader looked down. The photographer lowered his camera a fraction. On the left, a server carrying a tray stepped back to give her space, brushed a table edge, and in one small accident, the glass at the corner tipped. Red wine fell in a fast, clean arc that found the lace at my daughter's hip and bled upward as if the cloth were thirsty. Gasps, small and surprised, rose like birds startled from a hedge. The stain climbed and bloomed, bright and honest and impossible to hide. Her hands went to it and stopped, because there was nothing to do but wear it. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the old memory arrived with a new face. Red is for joy. Red is for courage. I stepped forward 2 slow paces and spoke in the tone you use when you cut away what will choke a plant. Leave it, I said softly. Some reds are meant to be worn. She looked at me, eyes wide, cheeks red to match the starburst on her dress. She laughed, but not the bright laugh from before. This one had water in it. I deserve this, she whispered into the microphone without meaning to, and a few people in the back nodded like a congregation that had just recognized its hymn. Her husband reached for the stain with a napkin and I lifted my hand an inch. He froze. Not today, I said, flat and even. Let the color teach. It will wash, but not too soon. He didn't understand, but he heard the door in my voice and stayed where he was. His father stood, adjusting his jacket as if fabric could fix a shape in the air. Perhaps, he began with the practiced smile of a man who likes to tidy feelings. We can all take a breath and return to celebrating. I turned my head and gave him the smallest polite nod a man can give while he closes a gate. Please do, I said. Eat, dance, celebrate. This night belongs to them. But the house does not, he sat. His smile stayed in place like a painting that no longer matched the room. I motioned to my daughter with 2 fingers, a quiet call she has known since she was little. She came. The stain had spread into a red field across the white, a flag declaring something more honest than plans. I moved with her a few steps off the floor to the side door that leads to the small library, cool and close and smelling of old paper and lemon oil. I closed it behind us and the party became a hum on the other side of a wall, like rain you can't see but believe in. I set the velvet case on the desk, the same desk where my wife once wrote lists with a blue pen, and took out the key fob in my pocket. She watched my hands. "What is that?" she asked. "The other half," I said. I knelt by the lower drawer and turned the key and slid the panel back to reveal the safe that lives quiet under the wood. It clicked open like it had decided to help me. Inside were not only papers. There was also a thin box wrapped in tissue, old and soft, and taped with the care my wife used to save for things she believed in. I took the box out and set it gently on the desk next to the velvet case. My daughter's hands flew to her mouth the way hands do when they recognize home. "Is that—" I nodded. "Your mother packed it," I said. "I was meant to give it to you when you needed to remember." Her fingers trembled as she took the tissue away. The red dress lay there, tiny and brave, as bright as the day it had met cake and candles. It looked impossible that so much of our life could fit into such a small square of cloth. Beneath it was an envelope with her name in her mother's careful writing. She touched the letters with one finger, and then looked at me, asking without words if she could. "Of course," I said, "because the word is bigger than paper." She opened it and pulled out a card. The ink had faded a little, the way courage fades if you leave it outside, but the words still stood. She read in a whisper that was meant to be only for her, but a few sentences escaped and found me. "If you forget where read. If you are cruel, turn toward kindness before it turns its back. If you are careless, apologize in the room where you were careless. If you think a house is a prize, sit on the floor and listen until you hear your name in the wood." She stopped reading. She pressed the card to her lips and then to her heart, the way a believer presses a prayer bead. Tears fell and made small, clean spots on the paper. "I forgot her," she said. "No," I said. "You forgot yourself. She wrote to both of you." She looked down at the red that had spread across her wedding dress. "I ruined it," she whispered. "You marked it," I answered. "Now it tells the truth. Red can be courage. Wear it." The room beyond the door sent a muffled roll of sound, a laugh and a clatter and a bass note that did not care what we were mending. She put the small dress back into its bed of tissue with the care of a surgeon and closed the lid. She touched the velvet case with one fingertip. "And this?" she asked. "It was meant for tonight," I said. "It will not be given tonight. Gifts are teachers."
"I won't teach you that respect can be added later like garnish." She nodded.
Eyes closed, and for a moment I saw her at 7, opening her eyes to read my face after she had told a truth about breaking a verse. "What can I do?" she asked. "Do the work," I said. "Not once. Long enough that the house hears your name again and likes the sound." We returned to the hall. The air met us with its bright smell of sugar and flowers and rented heat. Her husband stepped forward, his jaw tight with plans. "Sir," he started, careful, "we appreciate—" I raised one palm 1/2 inch and set it back down. "You and I will speak another day," I said quietly. "Today is not for deals. It is for vows and for learning." He swallowed his next move. His mother began another smile. His father began another sentence. The planner began to reach for the microphone. And then my daughter did something I had not taught her but had hoped she would teach herself. She turned to the crowd and lifted the microphone again before anyone could narrate her life for her. "Friends," she said, simple as bread, "I was cruel with a joke. I forgot respect and I forgot my mother. I forgot my father in the room he built. I wore white to be pure and I made it red with wine. I will keep it red tonight to remember courage." A hush spread from the center like dye in water. It reached the back and did not fade. "Please eat," she added with a small, true smile, "the kind you earn. Please dance. We will be out there with you. But know that today I learned the difference between a venue and a home. People did not clap. They breathed. 2 or 3 voices said, soft and low, "Good." The band, relieved to have a note to follow, began a quieter song, one of those old melodies that has honest bones even when it is dressed in new sound. The dance floor filled. I put the velvet case on the shelf behind the band where I could see it and where it could see the room. My daughter took my hand. It was the same hand that had pressed pencil marks on the pantry door. We walked a short circle together, slow enough that the stain on her dress moved like a small flag in a good wind. "Will you dance with me?" she asked, looking up with the face she used to bring to me when she could not open a jar. Yes, I said, and the word felt like water. We did not talk much. When we did, we spoke in small pieces that fit. You kept everything, she said. I kept what mattered, I answered. You could have thrown us out, she said. I could have, I said. I kept the door open. She nodded, and for the first time that night looked like a bride in the way I understand it. Not because of the dress, but because of the vow that had finally found the right room in her. The groom cut in, careful and a little stiff, and I let him. He looked at me once over her shoulder, an expression on his face like a man in a map store who has just learned the world is larger than the map he brought. Later, he approached me by the French doors and spoke in a low voice that did not ask the room to agree. I was rude, he said. I treated your home like a stage. I won't do that again. I looked at him for a long breath and saw what I had hoped to see. Not fear for money, but fear of being a small man in a big moment. Good, I said, and then added the thing that would be the measure. It will take time. He nodded. We'll earn it, he said. We'll try. Don't try, I said. Do, and if you fail, fix it faster. I did not throw clauses and conditions like confetti. I did not say she must do 3 things and wait 3 months and deliver 3 letters. I have learned that lists are for kitchens and toolboxes, not for respect. Instead, I made one quiet move. I told them that the trust would stay where it was for now. The house would remain open for Sunday dinners on our side of the family, for the kind of talk that takes hours and leaves dishes soaking and laughter in the curtains. I told them I would fund a small scholarship in my wife's name for a local girl who wanted to learn a skill with her hands, because homes keep growing when you water the soil outside their gates. I told them there would be a key on a nail by the back door, the way there always had been, and when they had taught the house their names again by how they spoke and how they listened, they would find that key fits more doors than one. The groom's eyes softened at the word scholarship. My daughter's shoulders lowered at the word Sunday. Both of them nodded at the word key, which is a good word when you have learned the cost of locks. The night found its feet again and walked forward with us. People ate cake and did not speak as loudly. The photographer took pictures with the good kind of care. His parents stayed polite and careful, and perhaps smaller than they had been when the evening began. I did not mind. The planner, who had thought tonight was about schedules, learned that it was about sentences. The stain on my daughter's dress dried into a darker red that made the white look whiter. Once she smiled, real and bright, and I caught a flash of the little girl who used to hide behind the couch and try to scare me by jumping out at the wrong time. I let her scare me then, because it made her laugh. And sometimes love is letting a small fright in, because it delights the one who brings it. Near the end of the night, she came to me with the small tissue-wrapped box tucked close. Dad, she said, I want to keep this with me. Not to show people, just to hold, I nodded. Good, I said. Red is for courage, she smiled. Red is for courage, she said back, and the words sat between us like a well-made chair. She hesitated, then asked the question she had been carrying. Will you still take care of the boiler? The way it bangs at night? I laughed and touched her shoulder where the lace met skin. Yes, I said, until you learn the sound yourself. She looked relieved in the way people do when they realize care is not alone. When the band played the last song, it was the one I would have chosen if anyone had asked. The one my wife liked because it walks instead of runs. I stood by the door and watched my daughter and her husband move across the floor. 2 people and 1 red. People will tell this story later, and the red will be the part they remember, because color does that to a mind. I hope they also remember the quiet. The way a man stood still and counted and spoke in a flat voice until the room learned a new shape. The way a woman in white turned red and did not hide, and how that made her beautiful in a way lace cannot touch. The way a house stayed a house and did not become a prize, and how that saved more than paper. When the last of the guests had gone and the lanterns were dim as tired eyes, my daughter walked with me to the pantry door, leaning behind the curtain. We pulled it out together and smiled at the messy ladder of pencil lines. She touched the highest one and made the small surprise sound people make when they see their old shadow. You pressed too hard, she said. I didn't want to believe the number, I answered. Press hard again, she said, turning to face the edge. Just once more. I lifted the pencil I keep on the shelf for this very reason. I marked a new line on the old wood, not for height, but for the night. I wrote beside it in small letters, red for courage. She leaned her forehead to the line and breathed out. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" I asked. "For not shouting," she said. "For not leaving." I touched her hair just once. "For learning," I said. "I do not know when I will open the velvet case for her again. It will be a day measured in Sundays and small apologies and the way a doorbell sounds when it is pressed with respect. It will be a day when the house says their names back to them without strain. It will be a day when red is courage and not stain. When that day comes, the clasp will make the same honest click, and the papers will be lighter because they will be carried by the right hands. Until then, I will keep the key on the brown leather fob, the one my wife joked about. I will check the boiler when it bangs. I will prune the rose bush without pity for dead wood. I will set an extra plate on Sundays. I will keep a pencil near the pantry door in case we need to mark another kind of growing. If this story moved you, if you felt the room, the breath, the red, let me know where you're watching from. Like this, share it with someone who needs to hear about courage, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story.